Cambridge Insider podcast time. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another action-packed episode of the Cambridge Insider podcast. You know where to find us. We're on all the platforms, wherever you find and digest your daily podcasts. We hope we've become part of that weekly routine. These are 10 and 15-minute episodes. If you're in the industry, you need to be listening to this. It's giving you all the up-to-date information. It's helping you strategize. And it's just giving you a platform to gain some insights. As always, my co-host, Miss Leanna how are you?
I'm doing great. I know I always start my week with the Cambridge Insider podcast, so I hope everyone else is too.
Exactly. And if you're not, tell us why not. Drop us a line. If there's something else specifically that you need insights to or you want us to share about, we're happy to do that. We're always happy to listen and hear from our listeners. Also, remember to like and subscribe and to share the podcast. With friends, family, other administrators, other teachers, anybody you think would find this useful. Leanna Glass, you shared an awesome article with me earlier this week. We were brainstorming a little bit and we thought this is a really important topic. And I know it's something that you're really passionate about. Why don't you go ahead and introduce the article? As always, we'll put it in the show notes, but, I want to sort of allow you to give a little synopsis there.
Definitely. So, yeah, as you said, this is a super important topic. We're talking about international students and mental health today. So the reason this is coming to light today is because the pandemic has really put a mental health strain on international students. And here at Cambridge Network and with our schools, we want students to have the best experience possible. And this is an important topic to cover, to understand, in order to give students a great experience here. We're seeing in the field on my end, we can see students dealing with some loneliness, maybe some depression, maybe some anxiety. Not all students, but enough where it's important that we're aware of it and we know how to handle it. So yeah, we're going to kind of dive into some of the things this article talked about in how schools can help and support students.
Awesome.
Right.
I do want to ask off the bat, and you sort of mentioned that you said in the field we're seeing, a lot of this loneliness, this depression, and this anxiety. Are you seeing that in students that are in person, or are you seeing that in students that are online and perhaps back in China, back in Vietnam, back in Korea?
We're seeing it in both. I can speak to my experience, which is students here in the US who maybe opted to do online learning. So they haven't been in person in school. They're not getting interaction with their peers or teachers. I think students in China or in their home countries too could be dealing with some of this, but they've got the support of their natural families around them. They've got their friends, and I think their countries have opened up a little bit sooner than the US has. They've probably gotten more socialization than our students here in the US may have, who opted to stay virtual.
Yeah. And I mean, if you do think about it just globally, regardless of whether a student is online, whether he's hybrid, whether he is in person, but it's a weird form of being in person with masks and with select students in class every single day. This is an enormous part of a student's identity gets formed at high school specifically, and you sort of messing with that, or we've taken that away, or we've taken some of it, not taken away, but we've been forced to change that a little bit. So just in that sense, we can imagine that students are, struggling with some mental health concerns. And certainly, I think something that we've become very aware of at Cambridge Network, but something that we want to make our school partners very aware of. And I'm sure you are, but it is an important topic for us to discuss.
Right. And especially because this article goes on to talk about how 70% of international students do come from Asian countries. And it's important to understand the context that culture plays in understanding and monitoring these mental health concerns. Historically, mental health isn't something that's really talked about in Asian culture. It can be considered taboo. It can be something that people more so hide rather than speak out about. It can be seen as a weakness. So it's really important that schools right off the bat educate students on how to look out for the warning signs of mental health issues such as depression or anxiety, or anything that falls into those categories of concerning emotions that go beyond I'm feeling stressed or I'm feeling homesick, things that go beyond those measures that can get really serious. And it's important for schools to make students aware and educate them on that stuff so that students know, okay, if I'm feeling this way, I can go to this person, I can go to this office, and tell them I need support because they have the tools to recognize it in themselves.
Okay, so it's about making that education available to students. It's also about making resources available to be able to deal with once a student identifies I might not be exactly where I need to be. My first question that popped in my mind is, if I'm a school official listening to you and you mentioned that sort of the cultural difference with regards to mental health, specifically in Southeast Asia, with regards to how we perhaps view it in the West, how would schools approach that, knowing that there is this difference, knowing that students might not see it the same way? If I'm a school official, how do I deal with this? Are there resources? What should I be looking out for? Who do I go to help me a little bit understand the cultural differences?
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind to me is Cambridge Network. We have wonderful resources to offer the school. Many of our student development managers and family education advisors who work directly with natural parents, natural families, are from Asia themselves, so they can absolutely speak to their own experience growing up in their own countries with parents who reinforced ideas about mental health that maybe they grew up with. And then when they came to the US or to another country to study, they started to understand it in a different way. So definitely, first and foremost, come to Cambridge Network and ask questions about what services we can offer you. Another thing I would recommend to schools is to be prepared for this and have cultural sensitivity training with your counselors that you have for students. In our host family pools, we absolutely do cultural sensitivity training in our orientations at the beginning of the year. And again, I would highlight with your new students at your schools, do an orientation to lay out the groundwork for what mental health looks like and should feel like for students and what supports are in place at your school so they know right away. And this is important too, especially this year, because we have seen a rise in anti-Asian sentiments in our country, sadly, and it's not something we can ignore. It's something we need to address and talk about with students, give students a safe space to express themselves, and just checking in with students, honestly, saying, hey, how are you doing, goes such a far way.
Absolutely. And it's sometimes a difficult thing to do because I know our school officials are often wearing 1,000 different hats, trying to do 1,000 different things. That's just the nature of, being in education sometimes, but it is such an important part of what we do. The students are ultimately the reason any of us are here, be it, us at Cambridge Network or you as a school partner. I do also want to point out that, you might be listening to that and saying, oh, cultural sensitivity training, is that not, do I have the resources? Do I have the time to do that? Most international populations make up 10 to 15% of a school as a whole. That's a significant amount of students that we're talking about, and a significant amount of students that don't necessarily have the regular support networks that our domestic kids have. They don't have mom and dad, brother, sister, with them at home, best friends, a community that they've grown up with that can support them through many of these challenges that they would face. So even more so, we should really be investing in making sure that we have the cultural insight that we need to be able to treat them and be able to be a resource for them, but also have those resources available. So Leanna, let me ask you then, moving on from the cultural sensitivity side of things, what resources specifically, you've mentioned some of our great Cambridge resources that we have available. What resources should schools be looking at to provide to students that are in need?
Yeah, so I would definitely emphasize again a mandatory mental health orientation for new students, but returning students could probably use it just as well. Creating some sort of orientation session just to introduce students to what they should be on the lookout for and to sort of start breaking the stigma that they might have around mental health. Every student should be connected with a counselor, that they should be checking in with, or a counselor should be checking in with them, I would say at least every month, just to check in, say, hey, how are you doing? And just making sure that students have tools and an action plan if they need it. They know exactly who to reach out to, who their counselor is. They know exactly, when they can go and see someone. And that should be really anytime. Students should understand that whenever they need support, they have it. And that's what can be introduced in those mandatory mental health orientations.
Yeah.
I yeah.
I do just there in that point, it's so well put. I think, excuse me, the communication between schools and Cambridge and host families plays such an important role here, because it might not be the school or the school counselor that finds out about this or is alerted to something. It could be the host family, it could be Cambridge, it could be the school. And that sort of triangular type of communication line is so important to make sure that everybody is aware, make sure that everybody's on the same page, is able to support in the different facets of the student's life where they might be the touch point for that student. It is really important for us to communicate effectively. So again, we try and emphasize that from a Cambridge point of view. We might not always be perfect with it, but really keeping those communication lines open and being proactive with the communication. If you do see something, let's set up a virtual call at this stage. Hopefully an in-person call come before. Let's sit together, let's brainstorm and come up with some resources that we can provide to students.
Absolutely. And when we've seen this pop up, working as a team is what is really necessary. Working as the student development manager with the host family, with the school counselor, to make sure that we are holistically providing the services that students are in need of.
And even more so, from my experience as an SDM, and you could potentially give a comment or two, yeah, but I found that the natural parents are a great resource in breaking down some of the barriers to mental health and mental health intervention. So initially, students might be a little bit, completely taken off guard, might be against any type of intervention or seeing anybody or talking to anybody because it's such a cultural unknown to them. Part of our strategy is to help have our FEAs communicate with the parents, communicate the urgency, communicate the support that's needed. Once the parents are on board, they're easily able to convince often a student that, hey, this is for your best interest. We approve as your parents. You should really make the most of these resources that are available to you.
Right. And likely, the school typically will have stricter protocol surrounding mental health issues, or if there's any doubt that a student is okay, the school typically has strict protocol to follow. And when we can, as the student development manager or family education advisor, when we can take that information from the school and say, hey, this is what the school is suggesting that your student needs, we can also help to break down those barriers surrounding mental health issues for the natural parents, because they know this is the school's expertise. This is their professional evaluation of what support the student needs.
Absolutely. I do just want to make one comment, Jan. I like to always bring it back to sort of the recruitment side of things, because that's an area of my speciality. But understanding that one of the things that we say from a Cambridge side is that, the greatest marketing tool and the greatest recruitment tool that you have is that excellent student experience, is making sure that every time a student interacts with the school, they feel supported, they feel that it's this amazing experience, because that ultimately will give that word of mouth for more students and more agents and more families to be aware of your school as a brand. This is exactly one of those opportunities that if a student is in need and you're able to support them as you should any student in your school, that it's an excellent advertisement for the type of caring, nurturing experience that a student can have if they come to your program. So, schools don't just see this in one view, although that's a very important view from a mental health standpoint, but understanding that this has ramifications for, your health of your program overall. Leanna Glass, any final thoughts? I know this is something, and I appreciate you bringing it to the podcast. I know it's something that you have a lot of experience in. You're very, very passionate about. Any final thoughts as we close this podcast out today?
Yeah, I think my final thoughts are really just that schools need to help students understand the warning signs of mental health issues and mental illness. Give students the tools to understand exactly who they can talk to and where they can go if this happens, creating a plan with them, and education, just starting from day one, breaking down the stigma around mental health, and making students feel comfortable sharing and expressing themselves. And if you can do all those things, you're already getting ahead of any major mental health concerns that could pop up throughout the year. Once you set those blocks into motion, you're already creating a safer place for students to maintain their health. And I think that's actually something so important to mention to students is your mental health is just as important as your physical health. Schools require gym class. Schools also need to be requiring the mental health maintenance of their students too.
Absolutely. And if you're mentally in a good place, very likely you're going to be succeeding at school. You're going to be doing a lot better. Ultimately, that's going to be good for the school. It's going to be good for everybody involved. So don't brush this aside. Understand that there are differences between our international population and our domestic population. And again, Cambridge is a great resource. We have amazing people like Leanna that work hand in hand with schools to make sure that they understand what is needed and where. Reach out if you need anything further from us, any further insights. We'll make sure that this great article, is posted on our show notes, and be sure to have a look there. It's really well written. I believe it's an interview with a psychologist that gives a couple of tips and insights into what we should be doing. As always, Leanna, thank you so much for co-hosting. You're the expert now. Episode number 104 that we've done together. You're the expert. To all of our listeners, as always, we appreciate you, and we will catch you around the next episode of the Cambridge Insider Podcast. Bye-bye, everybody.